Have you ever struggled to tell the difference between the quiet nudge of your intuition and the loud, urgent voice of your anxiety? If you are an empath or a seeker, that confusion can be paralyzing. But what if the way forward wasn't about finding the perfect answer, but rather asking a better question? Today, I am sitting down with a woman who has spent nearly 3 decades helping everyone from CEOs to spiritual seekers bridge the gap between their daily lives and their soul wisdom. By the end of this conversation, you will learn how to distinguish your authentic self from your past stories and make sure you stay until the very end, because my guest is going to share the single most powerful question you can ask yourself every morning to shift your entire reality. So stay tuned. Blessed day, soulful seekers. I am your host, Jessica Rooks, and welcome to Awaken Your Authentic Self, the sacred space where soul-led seekers, spiritual empaths, and truth tellers rise into our fullest expression together. Today, we are diving deep into the art of conscious change. My guest today is Jennie Lee. She is a Nautilus Book Award-winning author, an honor she shares with luminaries like Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle. She is the author of 3 incredible books, Spark Change, True Yoga, and Breathing Love. Jennie is a certified yoga therapist and a conscious creativity coach who has counseled clients for over 26 years. What I love most about her approach is that she bridges high-level spiritual self-development with pragmatic feet-on-the-ground tools. She helps us stop thinking about spirituality and start living it. Jennie, it is such an honor to have you here in this space with us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. It's lovely to be with you.
Well, Jennie, I want to jump right into the heart of your work because so many of my listeners are in a space of seeking right now. A core pillar of your teaching is that we are not our story. On this channel, we focus on awakening the authentic self. Can you help us distinguish the difference between the story of who we think we are based on a trauma or past achievement and the actual consciousness or authentic self underneath it?
Well, you did just dive right into the deep end there, Jessica. So here we go. Yes, the practice of meditation or even mindfulness at its root is so important for this distinction, because as we go about our day-to-day lives, we're completely enmeshed in whatever is happening, and we identify with it. We identify with the story of what's happening, with the emotions that we feel around it, and we often repeat the story and feed the emotions by repeating the story in our own minds. And so to have any sort of practice that gives us a little bit of distance what's happening from the thing that we're identifying with, whether it's a belief or an emotion or something external, it's that space that we give ourselves where we can name the emotion or name the circumstance, that then gives us that little bit of space to say, well, okay, but so who is it that is then experiencing that? And that distance is what starts to take us back to the awareness of the authentic self or the true self, that is the awareness, the consciousness that is watching that experience or having that experience. But we are not the experience or the emotion, we're the consciousness having it. But we have to have those practices that give us that little bit of space.
That is so powerful. And now let's speak on digging deeper. In your book, Spark Change, you focus on the power of asking questions rather than seeking immediate answers. For the spiritual seekers listening who are desperate for clarity, why is sitting with a provocative question often more transformative than finding a quick answer?
So I just got off another call where I was leading a group of women through a series of questions that all had to do with joy, the cultivation of joy. And I prefaced the workshop by saying some of these questions will feel simple, but trust that they're going to layer on top of one another, and you're going to see things by the end that you can't imagine at the beginning. And so what I find with the practice of self-inquiry or self-reflection using questions is that we get one layer with one question, and then we need another question, and it takes us to another layer, and then another layer, deeper, deeper, deeper we go. And we can't be satisfied with that first answer. If there's one thing I know, our minds don't always give us our best answer on the first answer.
Exactly.
Now, unless we are really in a deep state of meditation, the mind is calm and clear, and then we drop an intuitive question in there, then I think we can, learn to trust that first answer. But that's different than the mind that is restless and engaged outwardly all day, every day.
Correct. Absolutely. Now, I love that perspective. Now, you mentioned in your bio that change is easier when you elect it. But many of my listeners are in forced transitions, divorce, career loss, or spiritual awakenings. When we are in that scary void between the old self and the new, how do we apply your core value of fear without spirituality, bypassing our human emotions?
Well, there's a lot in that question that you just asked. So going back to the first part of it, so change is always going to happen. That's for sure. Life is just filled with change. And sometimes we can't select the kind of change. Things do come to us or at us that we have to respond to. But often, in times of transition, we do have choices. And we can navigate through even change that has come unexpectedly or uninvitedly to us. We can navigate through it with intention if we embark upon the process of change with intention. So I think the other part of the question had to do with emotion and fear. So when fear arises around any kind of transition or change, it's because we don't know the outcome. That's why most people resist change, is because they don't have a guarantee. Well, I don't know any lives that have guarantees.
Right.
So we have to be courageous. But fear is real. Fear comes up for all of us, and we can't bypass it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to learn to sit with it and become comfortable with it to the degree that it doesn't make us want to run and hide or distract ourselves or avoid whatever our next steps are. So learning to feel fear in the body and sit with it calmly, regulating our breath, regulating our nervous systems, so that we can know that it's not going to kill us to be afraid. Like we actually can be afraid and go forward anyway, but we have to get a little bit more comfortable with the experience of fear and recognize that it is part of any process of change.
Absolutely. I think you probably nailed it right there, because just being afraid sometimes it paralyzes a lot of people, and they just kind of stop in their tracks instead of realizing that if you can just push yourself past that point, realizing that it is a part of life, it's usually not so scary on the other side.
Yeah, we want to do that with compassion, right?
Absolutely.
So if the fear response is really high and someone is feeling a lot of anxiety in their body, the first thing we want to do is meet that with a lot of compassion and presence and calming practices like slowing the breath down or doing a simple breathing technique which will help regulate the breath. Because I mentioned the breath practices because that is one of the quickest ways to start to address the fear response in the body, because it brings us into the body awareness very quickly, and it affects the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us calm down and be able to sit with fear long enough to inquire around it and have the sensations without doing something to either freeze, flee, or fight, right?
Right. Well, Jenny, that actually brings up something very critical for my community. You state unequivocally that intuition is your best guide, period. My audience is full of empaths who sometimes struggle to hear their own voice. So how can we practically tell the difference between the quiet nudge of intuition and the loud, urgent voice of anxiety or fear?
Such an important distinction, right? You mentioned empaths, and I completely understand because I'm a very empathetic person myself, and I work with people who are often in various forms of crisis or trauma, and so there's a lot to feel just in the general world that we're living in, right? I think everyone's nerves are a little bit raw right now.
Right.
So it's so important that we have practices that help us to regulate our nervous systems. I mean, whether that's spending time in nature, laying on the ground, sometimes for me does it. I'll just lay down on the ground. Being completely grounded like that is very calming for me. For other people, maybe it's doing some spiritual reading or having a long, warm shower where you're intentionally kind of offloading the energies of other people or the news that you've read or whatever. But we need to have some practices that bring us into a state of regulation, a state of calm, because there's no way that we can hear the voice of intuition if we're not calm. The voice of intuition is always calm, steady, and persistent.
Yes.
So even if it's a difficult message that we're getting, it will be calm, steady, persistent.
That you say persistent, and that is dead on, because I know that there have been times where I'll get a message and I go, yeah, right, no. But it comes back to me a second time, a third time, and like I said, 3 is my magic number. When I hear it the third time, I go, okay, I guess that message is for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, in Breathing Love, you speak about love as an active practice, not just an emotion. You also mention that getting honest with yourself is often the hardest part. How do we practice breathing love toward ourselves when we are in a season of judging ourselves or feeling like we failed?
Well, I would go back to the word compassion, because we all have times of failure. We all have times where we aren't living into our very best, most loving selves. There's no human alive that doesn't have, periods where they're struggling.
Right.
So we have to meet ourselves with compassion, and certainly the capacity to be self-loving precedes our ability to be universally loving. The human experience of love is often very conditioned. We love someone because they're feeding back to us positive reinforcement or, a certain amount of what we're calling love. And then if that goes away, we don't feel loved anymore, we don't love them back, and it all breaks down. But that's not real love. Real love is unconditional, positive regard, and it begins within. It begins by knowing ourselves as being pure spirit by nature, the energy of love by nature, and that this is our ground of being. And so when we fall away from that and we're doing our human dance of whatever form of crazy that might be today, we can just, it helps to learn to laugh at ourselves a little bit, like, wow, okay, I really got off track there, but let me come back to my ground of being. My ground of being is love. And so I'm going to practice compassion by forgiving myself for mistakes. I'm going to do a little self-inquiry, see how I might have responded differently. How might I make a different choice next time if I reacted to someone badly or whatever? That's how I would meet that question, I guess.
Wow, that is a perfect way to meet it, because I actually had a moment like that recently where I always feel like I'm always in a place of love. I'm always smiling. Everybody always knows that. I'm always smiling. I find a reason to laugh. I hug. I find joy in everything. And someone was just so disrespectful to my partner the other day. And he's just a gentle giant. And I just reacted in a way that was like, Jesse from the Bronx for like 2 seconds. And I had to catch myself. And even he looked at me and I was like, oh, I need to breathe through this. I had to forgive myself and realize where it came from. And just take that moment to kind of readjust, dig my feet a little in the sand, because that's my place. And just come back to myself and then talk to myself and say, okay, well, why did that happen? Have that little conversation and treat myself with that love in that moment.
That's a perfect example, Jessica. Thank you for sharing that. That's really great, because we can right ourselves. We just have to catch the response that's, out of alignment with where we want to be, and take a moment to allow ourselves to re-regulate, like you said, and then do the inquiry, the internal inquiry, and then we can make different choices the next time. But all the while practicing that self-love and self-compassion, because it is very, very human to lose it sometimes.
To have a moment, exactly.
Have a moment.
I love floating in the 5D, but the 3D body every once in a while gives me a reminder of where I am.
Yeah.
Now, Jennie, you work with high-performing CEOs and creatives who do more only to pay the price of burnout. What is the somatic or spiritual signal that tells us we have crossed the line from passionate hard work into soul-damaging hustle?
Well, I think when we no longer feel joy in what we're doing, because I know for me, I've had lots of different iterations of my career over my lifetime, and every time I've gotten to a place where I wake up in the morning and I no longer feel like getting out of bed to do whatever it is I'm going to do, and I just lost the joy in it. Even if it was something that had brought me a lot of joy in years past, we change. We're meant to change. We should be changing. We evolve as beings. And so the form in which we're expressing needs to change. But sometimes we get really locked into a certain path, and then we almost don't think we can change. And this is particularly true for people who are at a certain level of their career. Change can be super scary because it would almost feel like starting over, or for an artist who has gained success in one particular style, but maybe their soul is calling for them to change styles, but they aren't sure that they'll sell in that different style. It can be scary. But that it would really be my marker. It has been my marker. It's like when I no longer feel joy at something, because when I'm in my passion and in the good kind of work mode, I don't feel tired. I can go 15 hours a day and not feel tired at all. I'm just on fire of inspiration. But when the joy has gone, I know it's time for a change.
Yeah, I always say that. I laugh because I remember thinking, even yesterday, I was in front of my computer for hours. Next thing you know, I look at it, it's like 4 o'clock. I was like, oh my God, like where did this whole day go? Like I was just so inspired in writing and I was just so in my place. You know, you forget to eat, but it's like I feel energized afterwards. I feel like I could keep going and I have to tell myself, you know what, you got to get up and stretch your legs a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh. Now, one of your core values is worth is inherent. Why do you think spiritual people often struggle the most with receiving abundance and acknowledging their own worthiness? And how do we break that loop?
Well, I just want to go back to that phrase so that people really hear it. Worth is inherent. Honestly, if I could get this message through everyone's minds, I would love to do that, because so many people that I talk to struggle with a sense of not being worthy in some way, not being worthy of love, not being worthy of success, not being enough in whatever it is that they're doing. And I always say the soul, the concept of worth doesn't even enter when we're talking about the soul. It's a completely human construct. We have made these gradations of worth based on all kinds of external factors, and none of it plays when we're talking about our true self, our true soul self. Worth is inherent. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to do anything to gain it. It is already there. So I think if we can really know that, then the question around receiving abundance is a non sequitur or whatever.
A no-brainer, absolutely.
A no-brainer, right? Because why wouldn't we be abundant? And why wouldn't we share that abundance? It's absolutely our birthright to be abundant in all the qualities of love and peace and success and joy and all of it. It's our soul nature.
Right. Absolutely. Now, you've bridged Eastern philosophy with Western living for about 26 years now. What is one specific tool from the Yoga Sutras that a busy, stressed out Westerner can use today while sitting in traffic or dealing with a difficult boss?
One of the practices that I go back to again and again in my own life, the word is saucha, and it basically translates to simplicity or purity. And if you think of the pure, simple joys in life, like the taste of a fresh strawberry or the beautiful ray of a sunrise light coming over the horizon, or the feeling of a hug. These very simple things. Simplifying is one of the greatest practices that we can employ. And it is completely counterculture in the West, because in the West, it's all about more, right?
Yeah.
More activity, more stimulation, more technology, more new things. And so we really are going a bit counter the norm if we choose simplicity. But I'll tell you, there's plenty of writing out there about how less is more, simple is beautiful, and I've been stripping down my life in whether it's minimizing the relationships that are not in balance, or minimizing the possessions that I keep around my home, minimizing the activities that I say yes to. All of that leads to a much more peaceful existence and a much more aligned existence.
I have to say and admit that once, I shared with you earlier how I sold off everything, and my listeners know, and made this move abroad, and I never felt more at peace. And I thought I would go a little crazy as people are buying my stuff, and especially like my shoes and sneakers and things I'm giving away. But every time I gave something away, I felt lighter. and more at peace, and felt this sense of just like, yes, like this is what I needed in my life, was less and not more. And the sad thing is, I think we teach our children from an early age by engaging them in 1,000 activities to keep them busy, that they're supposed to be busy to be happy. And it's just a wrong lesson that we're teaching them from the beginning.
Well, we're also really depriving them of the imaginative space that comes from having space in the day and not being filled up with activities. I mean, kids forever have just dug in the grass, and
Yes.
It's in those moments where their imaginations come alive. And we're depriving them of that if we're filling them up with activities from the outside all the time.
I didn't even allow my kids to have video games until they were 16. It was like, go outside and play. We lived on like an acre and a half of property. Go outside and play and find something to do. There is so much that you can do if you use your imagination. And they're both creative people now, so yay.
Yay. Good for you. You sound like a great mom.
I tried. I think that's all there's no book for it, like we all say, so we just do the best we can with what we have. Now, you coach creatives and founded an artist residency in Italy, which I think is phenomenal. Do you believe that our ability to be creative is directly linked to our spiritual health? And can we truly be creative if our spirit is blocked?
Well, like anything else, there's lots of different levels and forms of creativity. And certainly there are many creative people in the world who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves to be spiritual people, or they might not be on a spiritual path. However, I would say that any form of creativity is spirit moving into manifestation. So whether the individual is acknowledging spirit or not, to me, all creativity is spirit in action. Now, if we get intentional about bringing our spirituality and our creativity together and really asking some questions about, having a dialogue with spirit, because I believe we're co-creators, right?
Right.
And we're the instruments, and spirit is the doer. So if we're in dialogue with spirit and we're asking, what is it that you want to express through me today, then the whole creative process becomes much richer and more interesting. It also becomes, I'm laughing because it also becomes a little bit precarious, because sometimes what spirit might want to express through us, we're not too sure we want to tackle. And we're going back to the fear, and fear might arise. Right. I had one of those moments today. Something came through, and I was like, really? You want to do that? I'm not too sure.
I get those at 3 o'clock in the morning where it's like spirit wants to move through me because it's quiet and it wants me to get up and start writing something. I'm like, really? Like, how I love my sleep. Is this a test? But you get up and you do it, because it's true. You're more creative then. Well, finally, for the listeners who've stayed with us to the end, and I want to thank you all, I want to circle back to the promise I made them at the start. If you, Jenny, could challenge my audience to ask themselves just one question from Spark Change every morning for the next 30 days to shift their life, what question would that be?
So I'm going to turn the question around into a question.
Oh, I love it.
Because I think one of the most important questions we can ask is the one that I just alluded to, which is, what is the most important question for me to ask today? And you could ask that to spirit, you could ask it to your higher self, you could ask it just to whatever you think might be listening, but being curious and being in a questioning mentality, I think, is so helpful to entering the day with a fresh and open mind and not following just the old beliefs or patterns that we might have acquired over time. And it keeps life fresh, and it keeps us tuned into our intuition, and it can bring all kinds of really wonderful surprises.
Well, thank you. Well, Jenny, I want to take a moment to just pause and really honor the space that you've held with us today. In a world that often rushes us to fix everything instantly, your presence is such a powerful reminder of the beauty in slowing down and simply listening. Thank you for not just sharing your knowledge, but for sharing your heart and for giving us the permission to trust our own inner wisdom again. It has been a true gift to witness your light.
Thank you, Jessica.
For everyone that's listening who wants to go deeper into this work, where is the best place for them to find your books and to connect with you?
You can connect with me through my website, jennieleecoaching.com. My books are available through all major booksellers and independent bookshops like bookshop.org and also on Amazon. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I will have all of Jennie's links in the show's description.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for having me.
Thank you. And to my beautiful listeners, thank you for journeying inward with us today. I hope this conversation reminded you that you don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need the courage to ask the next right question. If this episode sparked something in your soul, please help us grow this sacred community by subscribing. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is one question you're going to ask yourself this week? So until next time, keep listening to your truth. Remember, you are not your story. You are the light moving through it. Namaste.